My name's Carol. 12 years ago, my dad tossed my suitcase on the porch and said, "Die on the street then." My brother pulled the blinds. My sister called it a family decision. They erased me, quietly, efficiently, took my name off the will, used it for funding, and claimed my silence was proof I never mattered. Now they're at my gate, smiling like nothing happened. Do I let them in? Or do I show them who I became when they close the door? I came home from the hospital that evening, still wearing my shoes from the previous night. I hadn't even stopped to change. All I wanted was a hot shower and maybe 2 hours of silence before starting all over again. But the silence inside the house didn't feel right. I paused at the bottom step. Merritt's truck was still in the driveway. Veda's car was parked crooked along the curb, like she always did when she was in a rush, or in a mood. The porch light flickered once before settling. I heard low voices inside. Sharp. Clipped. My name wasn't said aloud, but I could feel it being passed between them like a hot potato. I stepped in. The lights were dim, but the tension was bright. Dad was already standing in the living room, coat still on, keys in hand. He didn't look at me like a daughter, more like someone who'd overstayed a visit. "We need to talk," he said flatly. He didn't ask how the hospital shift went. Didn't mention the fact I'd sat with him for hours yesterday, monitoring his blood sugar. He didn't even glance at my face. Instead, he nodded once toward the floor, at the suitcase. My suitcase. "That yours?" he asked. His voice was dry, not angry. Worse, it was indifferent. I didn't answer, didn't move. "You've been here long enough," he continued. "You've gotten too comfortable. This isn't your home." He bent down, not to hug me, not to help me, but to toss a second bag on top of the suitcase. Then he looked me dead in the eyes. "You're not my responsibility anymore. Die on the street then." That's the part that stuck. Not the words really, but how calmly he said them, like he was offering directions to the post office. No one said anything. Veda looked away. Merritt rubbed his jaw like he had an itch he couldn't scratch. Neither of them said a damn word. And maybe that was worse than yelling. Worse than being kicked out. It meant they'd already agreed. It meant I'd already been erased. I picked up the suitcase. My hand trembled slightly. Not because I was afraid, because I still couldn't believe it. "I see," I said, mostly to myself. I walked out the front door. The night air hit me like a slap. The porch light blinked again and went out behind me. Then the door slammed shut. And that was it. I stood outside on the porch for a minute, holding the weight of my whole life in one hand and the echo of my father's sentence in the other. I turned toward the window. Merritt was there, watching from behind the curtain. I looked at him. Really looked. Not as my brother, but as someone who could have stopped this. He didn't flinch, didn't even pretend to hesitate. Instead, he lowered the curtain and vanished. My phone buzzed a few seconds later. I pulled it out with shaking fingers. "Please don't make this harder," the message read. Dad made up his mind. And just like that, the family was a closed room. I was on the outside. I sat on the porch steps for a while. Couldn't tell you how long. An hour, maybe more. I kept expecting the door to creak open. A voice to say they'd gone too far. A cup of tea. Something. Anything. But nothing came. I watched the streetlights blur into amber halos, counted passing cars, felt the night close in. Eventually, I stood up and walked. Not because I had somewhere to go, just because sitting there waiting to be unerased felt worse. As I walked, I thought about all the things I'd done over the years. The doctor visits, the late-night pharmacy runs, making Dad's favorite soup from scratch during flu season, tracking Veda's appointments, driving Merritt's kids to soccer. I gave so much, and they gave me the sidewalk. In every family, I remember whispering to myself, there's someone who gives up their life so others don't have to. That was me. I didn't cry. Not then. Crying would have meant I still expected something. That there was still hope in me somewhere, but by that point, even hope felt like a betrayal. Maybe I was never part of that family. Maybe I was just the help, the unpaid kind. I walked for miles, didn't know where I was heading. My phone battery was dying, my legs were stiff. The suitcase was too heavy, dragging on one side like a stubborn memory. Eventually, I stopped under a street lamp. The night around me was quiet, not peaceful, just empty. This is how you disappear, I thought. Not with a scream, but with a shut door. I didn't look back when I left the porch. Maybe because I knew no one would be standing there. Maybe because I'd already spent years looking for signs of warmth from a house that never meant to keep me. The road stretched out in front of me, quiet, cracked in places, forgotten like everything else that once felt like home. The wheels of my suitcase scraped against the uneven pavement, rubber squealing every few feet. No cars passed, no porch light flickered on behind me, no voice called out. I walked by homes with windows glowing warm. I could hear a TV in one, the clatter of dishes in another, the sound of other people's normal. It used to be mine. Now I wasn't even the memory. It was cold, but not enough to hurt, not enough to numb what already felt raw inside. I kept walking. You don't need a storm to drown. Sometimes silence does the job. 2 months earlier, I'd rearranged my entire schedule to care for my father. He fell, nothing major, but enough that someone needed to be around. I was already there, so it just made sense. I canceled an interview I'd been prepping for, promised to reschedule it the following week. I never did. I cooked every meal, managed his medications, took his blood pressure, checked in with the doctor. I didn't expect praise, but I didn't expect punishment either. One morning, he scrambled a few eggs for me, sat the plate down and said, "Don't think this makes us even." Even? I wasn't keeping score, but I guess he was. Looking back, maybe the whole family saw it that way, that I did what I did because I didn't have a choice, that my love came cheap, automatic, unconditional, like a faucet you forget to turn off. I thought I was helping. They thought I was filling a role no one wanted. That's the thing about being the reliable one. You start to seem replaceable until you're gone. Then you're nothing. There was a journal I kept during my mother's last year. Just a cheap spiral notebook, full of dates, notes on medications, things she liked to hear before bed. Times she woke up crying. Times she thought I was still a child. The night I was kicked out, it was gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd packed it wrong, but it wasn't in my bag. And a week later, scrolling mindlessly through my phone in the corner booth of a diner, I saw it. A photo from Veda's church group. She was holding it, my journal, with a red ribbon around it. "Mom's Final Days," the caption said. Presented by Veda Wiley. My name was nowhere. My handwriting was all over the pages. I didn't know words could be stolen like jewelry. It took me another mile before I found the motel. "The Hilltop Inn," the sign said. Neon flickering weakly, the eye burnt out. The lobby smelled like old gum and pine cleaner. The man behind the desk barely glanced up when I asked for a room. He handed me the key like he'd done it 1,000 times. Maybe he had. Maybe he saw women like me every week. Room 204, no questions asked. That was a relief. The bed creaked when I sat down. The room smelled like bleach, the kind of clean that's trying to erase something dirty. I dropped my bag by the door and stood for a moment, unsure whether to laugh or throw up. I unpacked slowly, shirts stuck together. A cracked hairbrush, the same shoes I wore at the hospital. No one knew where I was. No one asked. I left the lamp on that night. Not because I was scared, because if something happened, if I just stopped breathing in the middle of the night, at least someone would see me when they came in to clean. Lying there, I scrolled through my phone. Contact list full of names that once meant something. One by one, I deleted them. Except one. Dorla. Not in my contacts. Just a name I'd scribbled on a napkin in the hospital break room 2 weeks earlier. An older woman. Kind eyes. She'd said, "If you ever need someone to remember you, call me." I hadn't. I hadn't needed to. Until now. "If I wake up tomorrow," I whispered to the ceiling, "maybe I'll call her." The next morning didn't start. It just continued. I hadn't slept, not really. I must have drifted off for an hour, but the stiffness in my neck told me I'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, listening to the heater wheeze like it was dying a slow death. I sat up, blinked at the gray light sneaking past the curtain, checked my phone. No calls, no messages. A bank balance of $48 and some change. I stared at the cracked plaster overhead, and let the numbers sink in. So this is what starting over looks like. The suitcase was still zipped beside the door. I hadn't touched it since I dropped it there. Maybe I didn't want to unpack. Maybe some part of me knew it'd make this real, permanent. I slid on my coat, buttoned it halfway, and left the room without knowing where I was going. Just away from that silence. I ended up a few blocks down at the edge of a park. Didn't plan it. My legs just took me there. I saw her before she saw me. An older woman sitting on a bench like she'd been there a while. She had a paper cup of coffee and knitting needles moving steady like a heartbeat. I paused a few feet away. Didn't want to bother her. "You can sit," she said without looking up. "The world's wide enough for two broken women." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and sat down, careful to leave space between us. She glanced at me, then turned back to her knitting. "You look like you didn't eat. You want a sip?" I hesitated, then shook my head. She nodded. "Suit yourself." We sat in silence. "I'm Dorla," she said after a while. "No need to tell me your name unless you want to. Just don't pretend you're fine. That gets exhausting." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She sipped her coffee, looked at the sky, then said, "Ain't it funny? The people who gave up everything always get thrown out first." That one hit. Harder than anything my family had said to me directly. She didn't ask what happened, didn't ask where I was staying, what I did, who hurt me. Just sat with me like it was enough that I existed. Before I left, she handed me a napkin with a number written in shaky handwriting. "Just in case," she said. I didn't say thank you, I just nodded. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel invisible. Walking back toward the motel, I passed by a little community center. It had a bulletin board out front with church flyers, yard sale notes, and a few missing cat posters. Then I saw it, a tiny square printed off a home computer. Carol Wiley, previously reported missing, was found to have left voluntarily, no foul play suspected. I stopped, read it again. There it was, my erasure, official, public, reduced to one line in Times New Roman. I could picture my father saying it to the sheriff. "She left. We didn't kick her out. She chose to leave. Rebellion, not rejection. That's how it would play. That's how the town would understand it. And no one would ask for my version. No one ever did." I got back to my room, dropped onto the bed, and sat there. Quiet. The napkin still in my coat pocket. I pulled out my notebook, cheap, spiral-bound, and turned to a fresh page, wrote Dorla's name, her number, then beneath that, a list. Food, shelter, work, self-respect. I underlined that last one twice. Then I said it out loud, like naming it made it real. They didn't just throw me out. They rewrote the ending. I hadn't thought about my mother in a while, but now I couldn't stop. Her hands folding laundry, the way she used to hum when she cooked, how she smelled like lemon dish soap, and how she became someone else in their stories. Passive, forgettable. She wasn't either of those things, and neither was I. The sun was starting to set when someone knocked on my door. I stood slowly, cautious. Thought maybe, it was Dorla. But when I opened it, it was a stranger in a delivery uniform. "You Carol?" he asked. I nodded. "This was paid for in advance. Woman outside said you hadn't eaten anything warm in days." He handed me a brown paper bag. It was still warm. I closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened the bag. Chicken pot pie. Cornbread. It smelled like home. I found a napkin tucked inside, folded once. "Try again tomorrow. The world doesn't know you yet. D." I woke up the next day with a little less fog in my head. The kind of clarity that doesn't solve anything, but lets you take the first step. I made coffee with the motel's dusty machine and sat at the tiny table beside the window. The chair wobbled every time I shifted, like it wasn't sure if it still belonged here. Kind of like me. At the public library, I logged into one of the ancient computers. I scanned job listings, circled temp gigs that didn't require degrees or up-to-date references. Half of them asked for accounts I couldn't create. Most needed addresses I no longer had. Every page felt like a reminder. I wasn't invisible. I just wasn't part of the system anymore. Nobody looked at me. Not directly. I wasn't ignored. I just wasn't expected. I folded the paper, shoved it in my coat pocket, and walked 3 blocks to the nonprofit hub downtown. They called it a community center, but it mostly ran off donated snacks, worn flyers, and a sense of strained optimism. I knew someone there, or used to. Brinley Caskey. She was the daughter of an old friend from church, and she used to volunteer with me on a garden project back when I still had time to care about cucumbers and soil pH levels. Now she ran the place. She smiled when she saw me, that sugary kind of smile you get from someone who's already decided how the conversation's going to end. "Well, look who it is," she said. "We were just talking about you. Isn't that something?" I asked if there was any part-time work, something simple. Deliveries, cleaning up. I didn't expect a desk or a title. She tilted her head like she was studying a wounded bird. "You know," she said, "we actually just applied for a grant to expand the garden mentorship. I'd be happy to co-sign it with your name, just for old time's sake." I nodded, cautiously. No promises, just possibilities. 3 days later, I saw the announcement on the local news feed. Brinley Caskey launches Community Restoration Project, new grant approved. I searched the article, searched the website. My name wasn't there, gone. I stopped by the center the next morning, asked casually. Brinley blinked at me like I'd asked her to explain quantum physics. "Oh," she said, laughing gently. It was more of a formality. You didn't really have the bandwidth for that kind of thing anyway, right?" No anger in her voice. Just dismissal disguised as kindness. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. But my chest felt tight the whole way down the block. Not from rage, from the way she said it. Like my usefulness was temporary, disposable. A week later, I went to the celebration event for community contributors. I wasn't invited, but I knew the space, knew I could blend in, nod politely, stay out of the way. The slideshow started. Faces flashed across the screen. People I'd trained, taught, worked beside. No photo of me. Then a title came up. Family Sponsor, Recognition, Veda Wiley. I felt my stomach knot. My sister's name, my family's legacy, being pasted over my work like wallpaper. Someone behind me whispered, "Is she new here?" I smiled weakly and said, "No, I'm the part that got edited out." I left before dessert. Didn't want to hear clapping for ghosts. At the grocery store, I bought a single marigold, orange, slightly bruised, but still standing. Back in my room, I placed it in a chipped mug and whispered, "This is what being useful gets you. Congratulations." My phone buzzed, one message from Dorla. "Still breathing? Then it's not over yet." That night, I didn't cry. I wrote. In a blank notebook, I started sketching. A flyer. Handwritten. Simple. Just a title. Need help around the house. I'm not a company. I'm just good at what I do. At the bottom, I wrote my name. Carol Wiley. In ink. In bold. It wasn't much. But it was mine. The flyer sat on the table beside the marigold. It looked right. The motel phone rang just as I capped the pen. A voice on the other end, hesitant. "Hi, I'm looking for someone who knows how to fix a fence." I didn't pause. "Yes," I said. "I do." The man on the phone needed a fence fixed. I didn't ask for details. I showed up with a borrowed toolkit from the motel maintenance closet, a roll of duct tape, and a stubborn streak that had gotten me through harder things than a busted gate. It was simple work. 4 panels, some rusted nails, a few pieces that needed bracing. He handed me $40 in cash without even checking the job and said, "My sister's got a busted porch step. Want her number?" That's how it started. Within 4 days, I had 3 jobs lined up. Word spread, quietly, like moss creeping up brick. At the laundromat, someone had pinned up my handwritten flyer. Carol Wiley, Quiet Fixes. No fancy logos, just ink, just me. I put one up myself next to the vending machine. For the first time in months, my name wasn't attached to someone else's project or reputation. It stood alone, and it held. That Friday late afternoon, I was peeling off my boots outside the motel room when I heard it. A knock. And I opened the door and saw him. My father. He stood with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder like he was heading to summer camp, not begging his youngest daughter for shelter. "They told me I couldn't stay," he said, not even waiting for a hello. "Merritt's wife said I'm disruptive." He wasn't angry, just tired and cold. He didn't ask to come in. He just looked at me the way people look at grocery store doors, expecting them to open. I didn't move. My hand stayed on the knob. He sat down on the bench outside the room without another word, like this was always going to be the plan, like I was still the person who owed him something. Inside, my body didn't know what to do with itself. One part of me wanted to slam the door. Another part wanted to heat him some soup. The worst part of all wanted him to stay, because if he stayed, maybe he'd say something real for once. That night, I gave him a blanket and let him sleep on the motel room floor. We didn't talk much. I couldn't sleep though, not well. I kept hearing things, not out loud, but in my head, her voice, my mother's. "Don't let him shrink you." At sunrise, I got dressed and stepped outside. The parking lot was still wet from the night's drizzle. I was halfway to the vending machine when I heard his voice. I turned the corner, stopped just before he could see me. He was on the phone. "I'm working on it," he said. "She'll let me stay. Give it a few days and I'll have her add me to the paperwork." He laughed. "Don't worry, she's still soft." I didn't breathe. Not for a full 10 seconds. In my mind, I watched it like a scene in a movie. Watched myself handing him the blanket. Watched myself choosing silence again, thinking it meant strength. I almost gave him the part of me I had just rebuilt. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat down on the edge of the bed. When you grow up around manipulation, love starts to look like obligation. I pulled out my notebook and started writing. Not to process, not to vent, to make a list. What I won't do anymore. I won't make room for people who never made room for me. I won't confuse survival with virtue. I won't stay quiet just to keep the peace. I won't hand over my dignity for crumbs of approval. Dorla texted later that evening. "You good?" I stared at it for a while, then typed back, "I'm still learning to say no, but I didn't say yes." The next morning, I walked to the front desk. "I need to update my information," I told the clerk. He looked at me funny. "What's wrong with what we've got?" "My name," I said. "Make sure it's fully written out." He clicked a few keys. "Carol Wiley?" "That's right," I said. "All of it." After that, I went to the notary and signed new documents for my small business registration. No more ghosting myself. No more letting someone else take the credit while I fade out of frame. If I'm involved, it's with a signature. As I was walking back, I saw my father leaning against a post near the soda machine. He was talking to another man, older, maybe a friend from the VFW hall. "I told you," he said, grinning. "Once I'm back in, I'll help her handle the inheritance." The word hit me like cold air. Inheritance. Like this was a play. Like he'd been rehearsing lines since the night he tossed me out. I stopped mid-step. He didn't see me yet, and I realized he wasn't back because he missed me. He was back because he saw something he could claim. I turned around, stepped toward him. My voice wasn't raised, but it was steady. And this time, I wasn't the one walking away. The phone kept ringing. I kept working. 3 fence jobs turned into 6. A few porch rails, some gutter cleaning, and one stubborn old man who wanted his garage roof patched before Thanksgiving. The calls didn't stop, and neither did I. I printed new flyers at the corner shop, spent $20 on thick paper so they wouldn't curl in the weather. I pinned them up around town, grocery stores, gas stations, the post office, even on a corkboard outside the diner where people went for $5 lunch specials and small talk they didn't want to admit they needed. Each flyer had the same line at the bottom. "No work too small, just don't erase my name." I didn't expect anyone to notice, but folks did. Enough to keep me fed. Enough to let me stay one more week in my room without wondering if I'd be back out on the porch like before. One night, while patching up a broken sink in a mobile home on the edge of town, a client handed me a small flyer. "You heard about this?" she asked. "Voices of the Rebuild. It's a local thing, kind of a community showcase. I hadn't, but she smiled and said, I already submitted your name. You're the quiet one, but folks talk about you. A week later, I showed up. I wasn't dressed up, just jeans and a clean button-up. I didn't sit in the front, didn't want to take up space that wasn't mine. The event was in a repurposed gym with folding chairs and a projector screen that kept flickering. Then someone introduced me. Carol Wiley, contributor. I didn't even know they'd recorded my story. The video started, my voice, raw and real, saying something about second chances and working with your hands. 10 seconds in, the screen froze, went black. No one said a word, no apology. The host just moved on to the next speaker like nothing happened, like I didn't happen. I sat still, didn't move, didn't make a scene. I walked out halfway through the next presentation. On the way back, I spotted a courier stepping out of a dented van parked outside the motel. He handed me a manila envelope, came from a law office, no return address. Inside was a folded copy of a document, my mother's handwriting, dated and yellowed at the edges. It wasn't the version that was read at the funeral. This one was messier, more honest. There were side notes in blue pen, crossed-out items, additions that never made it to the final version. One line stood out. If anything happens to me, Carol gets the house and whatever's left of the land. She'll know what to do with it. There was no signature, no notary stamp, just a sticky note that said, "Found this in an old file box. Thought you should have it." I sat on the motel bed for what felt like hours, that sheet of paper in my lap, staring at my name, not erased, not rewritten, just there. That night, I didn't cry, but I came close, not because of the will, because of the where. Because I was tired of being the part they cropped out of every picture. I went to the front desk and asked to update the guest file. Full name, I said, not just an initial. The clerk didn't blink, just typed it in. Carol Wiley. Later, I opened my business profile online and rewrote the bio. I'm not here to be remembered. I'm here to never be forgotten again. Then I clicked post. The next morning, I walked by the community center again, the same corkboard where I'd pinned my flyer. Mine was gone. In its place, a new one. Same layout, same phrases, but no name. Just repair services. Call now. My stomach turned, not in fear, but in recognition. Someone didn't just want what I did. They wanted the space I'd finally claimed. I stood there for a minute, hands still, breath even. Then I pulled a pen from my coat pocket and wrote on the bottom corner of the flyer, "This looks familiar." That's it. Just enough to remind whoever put it there, you can try to steal the script, but I hold the pen now. I woke up before the sun, not because of noise or stress, but because something inside me had shifted. I wasn't on edge anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone to rescue me. I wasn't asking permission to exist. It was quiet in the room, just the hum of the mini fridge and the occasional creak from the heater kicking on. I sat up, pulled my notebook onto my lap, and started writing. Not to vent, not to process, to plan. This isn't about revenge, I wrote. It's about not letting them lie about me anymore. I made a list, names I needed to confront, people who had helped bury me in silence, not out of spite, out of order, out of necessity, the way you clean a wound before it turns septic. I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. Later that afternoon, I sat across from Kepler Dade, the only lawyer in town who had bothered to call me back. He placed 2 documents on the table. One was the will that had been read publicly, the one that left the house to Veda and the accounts to Merritt. My name had shown up once, as a mention, nothing more. The second was a copy, clearly older, handwritten by my mother. She didn't sign it, Kepler said, but the notations are dated, consistent. She clearly intended to revise the will and never got around to filing it. In that version, she named me as caretaker, stated that I was to inherit the house and the land attached. She wrote things like, "Carol will handle it best," and "trust her judgment." My hands didn't shake. I didn't tear up. I asked him to explain the legal standing, what I could do, what it would cost. He gave me options. Court, mediation, quiet letters to their attorneys. I shook my head. No court can make my family acknowledge what they buried, I said, but the truth still has teeth. I asked for a notarized copy. I didn't need a judge. I needed the truth printed in a way they couldn't delete. The next day, I went to a local event at the community center, one of those things with folding chairs and stale cookies, speeches by council members who talk too long. I didn't go as a guest. I just showed up, stayed quiet, sat in the back. A younger organizer walked past and handed me a box of bottled water. "Could you pass these out to the guests?" she said, not even asking who I was. I did. Why not? Then I heard my cousin, not first cousin, but one of those family branch cousins, laugh behind me. She didn't recognize me. Then I saw it, pinned to the wall. A flyer almost identical to mine. Same font, same wording. Quiet fixes. But this one, no name. I didn't tear it down. I didn't make a scene. I stood there, right in front of it. Let people pass. Let them notice. Let them feel the unease of familiarity. That night, I got home and opened my laptop. Created a post titled, "What They Tried to Bury, a Timeline of Erasure." I attached everything. A photo of my original flyer, time-stamped. The short video clip that got cut at the community event. The handwritten copy of my mother's will. No blame, no names called, just dates, documents, screenshots, truth. I pinned the post and left the comments open. It took less than 24 hours. Messages rolled in, some from strangers, some from people I hadn't heard from in years. Most said the same thing. I didn't know. One just said, "I believe you." That night, I was folding laundry when my phone lit up. Caller ID, Veda. I let it ring. I didn't pick up. The voicemail transcribed automatically on screen. "You've gone too far, Carol. You don't know what you're starting." I stood there, towel in hand, staring at those words. Then I whispered, "That's the problem, Veda. I finally do." The morning felt quieter than usual. Not because there was less noise, but because I had less weight in my chest. I wasn't excited. I wasn't nervous either. Just still. The community forum was scheduled for noon. I'd been invited by a client who thought my story deserved to be heard. I didn't argue. I didn't prepare a speech either. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I ironed a clean shirt, pressed my pants, and took an extra minute to pin something small to my jacket. A folded napkin. Simple, white, no embroidery. It matched the one I'd dropped on the kitchen floor the night Dad told me to get out. That napkin had stayed in my memory longer than most of his insults. This one reminded me I'd picked myself up. I walked through town quietly, flyers in my bag, the letter still sealed in my purse. When I arrived, the corkboard outside the center caught my eye. My flyer was gone again, replaced by a generic copy. Same format, same color, no name. That didn't sting anymore. Inside, the chairs were half full, the walls humming with the polite murmur of people trying to look busy while waiting. I was listed on the program, not last, not first. The host called my name. I walked up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't clear my throat. I said what I needed to say. I'm not here to explain. I'm here to state. For years, I was part of a family that only saw me when they needed help and forgot me when it was time to say thank you. I was erased from their stories, their credits, their family photos, and when I asked for space to breathe, I was told to disappear. I paused, let the air sit. But I didn't disappear. I rebuilt, and today, I speak not for revenge, but for record. That was all. I stepped down. Outside, before I could leave, I saw him, Calder, my father, standing just far enough from the building to avoid being seen by most, but close enough to stop me. "You're really gonna drag our name through the mud in public?" he said, voice low and heavy. I handed him a folded sheet of paper, not the will, a notarized copy of my mother's notes, her handwriting. He didn't even unfold it. "You told me to die in the street," I said. "And I did, but then I built the kind of life you never imagined I could survive long enough to live." He looked at me like I was a stranger who had stolen his parking spot. "You were always dramatic," he muttered. He turned to walk away. I didn't stop him, but I did say, loud enough for him to hear, I'm not telling them what you did. I'm showing them who I became. He didn't turn back. Later that afternoon, after the event, I walked around the building, found a quiet spot behind the center near a picnic bench no one used. I pulled out the sealed envelope I'd found last week in my mother's jewelry box. I hadn't opened it until now. The handwriting was hers. Carol, if you're reading this, you already know the truth I couldn't say out loud. The ink trembled in places, but the words were steady. She apologized for not doing more, for letting them chip away at me for so long. She said she saw it. She just didn't know how to stop it. You were the heart of this house, the letter read, and that's why they needed to break you. But you're not broken. You're blooming. I folded it back carefully and placed it in my purse. The next day, I visited the house, the old house. Mine now. Quietly transferred, quietly bought, quietly claimed. The grass had grown wild. The porch sagged in the corner. But it stood. I hung a small wooden sign out front. The Ellen Wiley home place, a space for those discarded. Inside, I didn't add much. Just a few chairs, some donated coffee mugs, a bulletin board, and her letter, laminated, pinned next to a quote I'd printed in bold. If they couldn't see your worth, it doesn't mean you weren't valuable. That night, I turned off the lights, ready to lock up when I saw someone walking up the path. Merritt. He looked older, more tired than I remembered, worn down in a way I hadn't seen before. In his hand, a folded program from the event. He didn't ask to come in. He said, I read the whole thing, including the parts we never let you say. I looked at him, then stepped aside. Then let's see if you're finally ready to listen. Merritt stepped into the community house like he was walking onto someone else's porch, which, to be fair, he was. I motioned to the chair across from mine and poured 2 mugs of tea, not as a gesture of peace, just a reminder. This space, my rules, my walls, my temperature. He sat down without removing his jacket. It was too quiet, but I didn't fill the air for him. I don't know where to start, he said finally. Try with the truth you've never said out loud. He blinked at me once, then nodded. No defenses, no excuses, just the slow unraveling of years packed too tightly between us. He said they all knew, that I was the one who held everything up when Mom got sick, that when Dad barked, I was the one who jumped. But no one wanted to get between him and his legacy, he said. We just let you take the weight and told ourselves you were fine. I didn't answer. Some silences carry more weight than words ever could. Then came the question. You ever think about coming back to the family? I almost laughed, not out of amusement, out of disbelief. I never left, I said. You all pushed me out and locked the door behind me. He looked down at his hands like they might rewrite the past if he stared hard enough. I don't expect anything, he said, but I was wondering if maybe I could help out here. Volunteer. I leaned back, arms crossed. You can help, I said, but you'll start with the trash bins. He blinked again, just like I did. Later that afternoon, I stepped into my office to grab a folder. That's when I saw it. A napkin, folded, neat, fresh. The same kind I dropped on the floor all those years ago, back when Dad kicked me out and nobody thought to pick it up. This one had been folded by one of our teenage volunteers, left on my desk with no note, just placed there like it belonged. I picked it up, held it for a second. This time, I whispered, no one gets to drop it but me. I slid it into a memory frame next to Mom's letter, hung it above the light switch, a quiet corner, but honest. That night, I recorded my final video message, no script, no edits, just me, looking into the camera with a voice that didn't tremble anymore. When silence stops being survival. That's what I called it. I talked about legacy, not the legal kind, the real kind, the kind we build in the cracks people tried to bury us under. They called me a burden, I said, but burdens don't build buildings, and we built this one, for everyone who ever got erased. I ended with one truth that had stayed with me the longest. Some bloodlines are curses, and some of us are here to break them. Then I hit upload. When night fell, I turned off the lights, Walked the hallway, passing the framed photos of every woman who had found her voice here. Every story mattered, including mine. One frame was still empty. A placeholder. I took a pen and wrote a note, slid it into the frame. Your voice belongs here. Don't let anyone rewrite it. Then I locked the front door behind me, not because I was leaving, but because I'd finally claimed something that wouldn't be taken again. This wasn't a comeback. It was a claiming, and it's just getting started.